Hello, class. So today what we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at chapter 7. And as you can see behind me, I'm in a factory. They're building, it looks like maybe terracotta tiles for roofs. It's what they're making. But because this chapter is looking at production costs and industry structure. So let me go ahead and get our PowerPoint up. So this video will have 5 parts to it. One is dealing with explicit and implicit costs and accounting and economic profit. And then there'll be a section on production in the short run, costs in the short run, production in the long run, and costs in the long run. And so to bring it home, we'll discuss a little bit about Amazon. So in less than 2 decades, Amazon.com has transformed the way that people sell, buy, and even read. Prior to Amazon, independent bookstores with limited inventories and small retail locations were the ones that primarily sold books. There were exceptions, of course. Borders, which is no more, and Barnes and Noble, which is still a thing, offered larger stores in urban areas. I know we recently lost our Barnes and Noble in Merced because they didn't want to renew the lease. They wanted to put a more furniture for less in there instead. So that's what's in there now. Um, but anyway, in the last decade, however, independent bookstores have mostly disappeared. I think there's one bookstore that we like to go to in Turlock, and it's no more now, sadly. And then Borders, as I said, has gone out of business, and Barnes and Noble is struggling, but they're still a thing. Online delivery and purchase of books has overtaken the traditional business model. How has Amazon changed the book selling industry? How has it managed to crush its competitors? A major reason for the giant retailer's success is its production model and cost structure that has enabled Amazon to cut the competitors' prices even when factoring in the cost of shipping. So we'll find out how firms great like Amazon and small like your corner deli deal with what they sell, output, and price. But Amazon, of course, now they don't just sell books, they sell a lot of things as well. And the other thing that they do with selling books is you can write a book yourself and then ran it through Amazon publishing. So you're able to, and they'll do a thing it's called print on demand. So instead of having, you know, 1,000 of your books there in a warehouse, they will just print your book on demand when someone orders it. And of course, Amazon now doesn't just sell Amazon, they sell all kinds of things. I know I like to use them I'll buy the pods for the Keurig coffee maker from there because it's a lot cheaper to buy a huge box of them from there than it is to just keep buying the little individual boxes at the grocery store or buying our medicine, some of our cleaning products, stuff like that we need. It's easier to buy a lot of that from Amazon than it is to go to the store, and it's cheaper. And so this chapter, it's going to be the first of 4 chapters that look at the theory of the firm. And this theory explains how firms behave. So basically, again, to define, so a firm, which would be either a producer or a business, is an organization that combines inputs of labor, capital, land, and raw or finished component materials to produce products. So it could be, for an example, the other day we had a family gathering and we had to go and take her brother-in-law into Subway to get him a sandwich because he didn't like we were serving. Well, what does Subway do? Right? They have the building which they rent, the building that they're in, and they have labor, which are the workers, and then of course all of the raw materials, the bread, the meat, the cheese, which unfortunately he can't have. He's allergic to cheese. And all of the vegetables and things. They put all of that together, the raw materials, in order to make the product, which is the sandwich, is what they're selling. Or you think about, I know everybody got new laptops there not long ago. Well, HP, they don't make the individual parts, but what they do is put them together. So they bought the screens from somebody. They bought the keyboard assemblies from somebody. They bought everything else and then they put it all together. So that's what a firm does. Now, production then is the process of combining the inputs to produce outputs, which are ideally of a greater value than the value of the inputs, right? So again, the sandwich, the lettuce and the cheese and the meat and all of that is worth, but you pay for when you it costs, $15 or whatever it was for a meal. It's because it's all put together in the form of a sandwich and then the bag of chips and the drink. Talking about, Starbucks, or not Starbucks, but Subway. And then private enterprise is where the businesses are owned by private individuals. And so that Subway more than likely is a franchise where they purchase the rights to be able to have that and to run that, right? So that's a private enterprise. So we see here the spectrum of competition. And so we see where there is many firms. We have what is called perfect competition, which we'll be talking about that more in chapter 8. And then we have monopolistic competition, which we'll talk about later, which is where there are many firms that have similar but not identical products. We have where there are only few firms that produce identical or similar products, which is an oligopoly. And then we have where there's one firm that is the only firm that makes products, and that is called a monopoly. And we'll talk about what each of these are and some of the pitfalls and some of the why that is. All right, so now on to section 7.1, which is explicit and implicit costs and accounting and economic profit. So remember that the goal of business, as we talked about when you took accounting 4A, is profit is the total revenue minus the total cost. And so just to remember that. So that's our goal of business, is to earn a profit. That's what businesses, if they aren't doing that, then they're not going to stay in business very long. And even a business that, let's say it's a nonprofit, and I know I've been following what's going on in Orange County in Garden Grove with this tank that is they're afraid it was going to explode. And it sounds like now the latest, as of whatever day it is today, as of Monday, the 25th, that it wasn't supposed to explode. Now I guess it's cracking and it's let off some of the pressure that was inside of it. But one of the groups that's been helping a lot of the people that had to evacuate is the Red Cross. Well, the Red Cross, they're a nonprofit. They're a 501c3 nonprofit. But even for them, they have to still look at what their revenues are, which is the money that comes in, and then, of course, what their costs are. And they can't have their cost to exceed their revenues, because if they did that, they're not going to be able to stay in business very long. So, and continue to help people. So even nonprofits, they have to make a profit, but really not a profit, but they have to make sure to cover their costs. So revenue is the income that a firm generates from selling its products or offering its service. And so revenue is usually calculated by taking the price of the item multiplied by the quantity of that item that is sold. And so we see that. And we have explicit costs and implicit costs. Explicit costs are the out-of-pocket costs, or the actual payments that the business has. So they have wages, rent, the cost of supplies, the cost of utilities. Those are actual payments that are actually going out. Then we have implicit costs, which are the opportunity cost of using resources that the firm already owns. That could be in depreciation on goods or equipment, depreciation on materials, so on and so forth. So money really isn't going out, but yet you still, as you have a piece of equipment, as it's being used, it's being depreciated, and the value of that item is going down. So we see that. Then we have the types of profit. We have accounting profit, which is the difference between the dollars brought in and the dollars that are being paid out. So So that is accounting profit then is what's actually being paid out. So total revenues minus the explicit costs that we looked at previously. Now, economic profit would include both the explicit and implicit costs. So economic profit is defined as the difference between the total revenue minus the total costs. So the total costs being both types of costs, the explicit costs and the implicit costs. And there's a work it out on page 160 that kind of explains this in more detail for you.